Hi, I'm Bill Bradley. Join me for a recent excerpt of American Voices. Here at American Voices, we celebrate all that America has to offer. So after hearing about people who do wonderful things and people's life stories, we also want to celebrate the land. So each week we invite artists and writers to tell us about a favorite place in America. Well, this time we'll hear from author Margaret Bradham Thornton. Her new book is called A Theory of Love, a Novel.
My name is Margaret Bradham Thornton, and my favorite place in America are the Cypress Swamps off the Edisto River, just south of Charleston, South Carolina. The Cypress Swamps that I'm speaking of are incredibly beautiful. The trees grow very tall, and they can go up to 100, 150 feet, and they have green, feathery canopies. I've always loved them because when you go into a swamp, I'm reminded of the cathedrals of Europe. The canopies are very high, and you sort of have this vaulted ceiling. And you go from, in the south, from a place that's very hot and sunny. The minute you step into the swamp, it's very cool and dark, and the air almost has a menthol scent about it. The sounds travel across the water, and they're very clear, and you can hear a bird or a woodpecker, and there's sort of a bit of an echo. So it's just sort of enchanting. I remember going into the swamps with my grandfather, and I think that's where I first experienced the kind of understanding of trust. You know, when you're a child, you trust your parents, but that happens so early and so organic, you really never think about that. But my grandfather, on occasion, would take a small group of his grandchildren out into the swamps, which he loved, and he would take us carrying a machete, to cut the brush. And, that was rather dramatic and rather exciting. And he led us into this world that was intimidating and, frightening with strange sounds, and there were lots of animals we had read about. And we were depending on him to keep us safe because we knew that there were alligators and snakes and all sorts of other critters in the swamps, and that we were invading their habitat. And he would tell us or teach us that if we respected the animals, they would respect us. It was like Hansel and Gretel in a way, going into the woods. It was just very strong to me. A couple of times he took us, and this was really magical. He would take us to watch the logging crews. And he was in the timber business, but he was also a conservationist. So he was one of the first to figure out how to selectively cut timber in these cypress swamps. And I remember going in the swamp with him and watching this. This is also, this goes back to this spiritual dimension, but my grandfather was killed in the swamp when I was 9 years old. And he was killed, they were doing one of these roads, and he was wearing a hard hat, but when the tree, and he was 80, when the tree fell, one of the branches sheared off and hit him in the head, and he was instantly killed. And, it was so sudden, and yet it was in the place that he loved so much, and that was so much a part of who he was. My grandfather had been born in North Carolina and had come down to the South because he had fallen in love with the swamps. So in a way, his spirit is in the swamps for me. So when I get back to South Carolina, if I can, I'll go for a walk through the swamps. And I would have loved to have had my grandfather and his wisdom and his love of nature, long into my life. But I think it's the understanding there's certain things you have no control over in life. And that's part of nature, too. I remember more now the things that he taught us and the richness that he gave our lives. He could look at the sky and know if he thought it was going to rain, or he would find direction by where the sun was. So it was that sensitivity to the natural world that, I think a lot of kids are not ever introduced to. The other thing that I'd say that I think about him is that, and I'm very proud of, is that he was always very respectful of other people. If someone was in a worse position, he was always there to be helpful if he could. During the Depression, with this timber company, no one was buying houses or timber or anything, but he kept everybody working by continuing to cut timber and mill timber. And he would build some houses on Folly Beach or, small sort of vacation houses for people, just to keep people working. even to this day, people speak about him with great love in the country. And I'm very proud of that he had respect for others and was appreciative of the advantages that he has and was always there to help someone out when needed. He inspires me. He would have loved to have met my children. And I hope that I can instill in them a respect for nature, a love of nature, and that strong sense of respect for others, no matter what walk of life you come from, that is super important in today's world. When I go back at the swamp, I feel so strongly his presence.
That was author Margaret Bradham Thornton. Her new book is called A Theory of Love, a novel.
And it's time. And it's time.
Thank you for listening to American Voices here on my YouTube channel. For more interviews celebrating the goodness and creativity of the American people, click the subscribe button below.